All right, so we need to pick up where we left off talking about transitive and intransitive verbs. So as we're going through here, we have said that in talking about verbs, we have two big categories. We have action verbs and we have linking verbs. And in the category of action verbs, every single action verb that we look at is either going to be transitive or intransitive. And you can see here, transitive verbs are the ones that are action verbs that transfer action to the direct object. And to follow on that, sometimes when we have a direct object, we might also have an indirect object. And so we have a couple of formulas that we kind of plug into to try to figure out, okay, do we have a transitive verb? In other words, does this verb have a direct object? And then secondly, if we have a direct object, is there something that's receiving that direct object? And if so, we would call it an indirect object. So let's do maybe a couple of examples of this. It'd be a good idea for you to pause the video to kind of work through these practice sentences for yourself. So here's what we would look at. I hope that you've already worked through these on your own, and you can kind of check yourself as we go through. So we're looking for subject, verb, and direct object. So in the first sentence, leave that pen on the desk. We have to find a subject, and that subject is the understood you. It's an imperative sentence. It's telling you to do something. So you is the subject, leave is the verb, and we would ask, okay, is that an action verb? Yes, you can leave something. So then we plug it into our formula. Remember, we have this formula for finding a direct object. We look at the subject, and we look at the verb, and we ask the question, what? Are you amazed by this handwriting? Subject plus verb plus what is going to give us the direct object. So you leave what? That's how we would plug this in. You leave what? Pen is going to be the direct object in this sentence. We could check for an indirect object by saying you leave pen for whom? Or you leave pen to whom? And then we don't get an answer to that. We have a word that tells us which pen we're talking about. That's an adjective. We have on the desk, which is a prepositional phrase telling us where to leave it. But that's it. We've got a subject, a transitive verb, and a direct object. Same thing on the next sentence. Number 2, Ella won the award for best singing on Tuesday. Here's a little tip. If you want to know how to go ahead and make this easier for yourself, we really could get rid of prepositional phrases. That's one of the best ways to get correct answers when we're looking for subjects, verbs, and their complements, like direct objects and indirect objects. So if you see some prepositional phrases, why don't we just identify them and say, all right, we're not going to find a subject, a verb, or a direct object in prepositional phrases. So we can actually just kind of forget that these are here. We don't need those for what we're doing right now. We do need a subject, a verb, and maybe a direct object. So Ella is the subject, won is the verb, and it's an action verb. You can win. So if we have an action verb, we plug into our formula. Ella won what? Award answers that question. That makes award the direct object. That makes won the transitive verb. Okay? The next one, can you give the breakfast burrito to Tom? Well, to Tom is a prepositional phrase. Let's go ahead and knock that one out of there. We don't need that right now. And then we're looking for our subject. So who or what is doing the action in this sentence? It's you. That's your subject. And then notice this question mark over here means that this is what kind of sentence? It's interrogative, which means it's usually going to be inverted. And if you remember back a little ways, inverted sentences usually have like a split verb. So we know give is the main verb and can is its helping verb. So this sentence really says you can give. And then it's an action verb. You can do that action, so we plug it in. You can give what? And in this case, burrito answers that question. That's the official correct pronunciation for burrito, just so you know. Burrito. So you can give. That means that can give is a transitive verb because it has this direct object. Breakfast is over here just as an adjective, just telling us what kind of burrito we're talking about. It's got eggs and bacon and cheese. It's delightful and delicious. Tom's a lucky man. All right, the last one. I have the power and the money. That's a lie. I don't have the power or the money. But if we needed to find a subject, we would say I is the subject, have is an action verb, and then we just plug in I have what? I have power. Not really. I have money. Definitely not. So notice there are two direct objects here. We've discovered something that's important for us as we move forward in doing this. We've discovered that you can have a compound direct object. So if more than one noun or pronoun answers our subject plus verb plus what question, that means that we can have more than one direct object. Do, 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 do. That's what that says. So subject plus verb plus what gets us a direct object. Let's then move on. Let's see if I can move on without erasing all of this. Nope, it's going to make me erase all of this. Boy, it's going to take a minute, isn't it? I wonder, do I really have to erase all this? What if I just go back to pointing it out? Aha! Get rid of you. Move on. Oh, look, I had all those things written in there already. Do need to erase. Bear with me. The eraser is a slow tool. I bet somebody knows a faster way to do this, but that person is not me. As you can see, if we're dealing with action verbs, we're calling every action verb either transitive or intransitive. And we've already dealt a lot with transitive verbs. They're these ones that have direct objects. They're transferring action from the verb to that direct object. And that just leaves us to quickly discuss intransitive verbs. So intransitive verbs are just the opposite. They're going to be these action verbs that don't have direct objects. They're not transferring action to some other word. And if you plug into our formula for a direct object, but you're dealing with an intransitive verb, then you just won't get an answer for that. So, for example, you might look at this sentence. The river rushed over the dam, destroying as it went. What's your subject? It's river. What's your verb? Rushed. And if we plug into our formula there, river rushed what? Now be careful with that question. That's a really important question. The way that we say it is important because if you say the river rushed where, we have an answer for that question. But if you say the river rushed what, we don't get an answer. Here's a prepositional phrase. And by the way, if we noticed that this was a prep phrase at the beginning, then it would be really easy to tell, oh, there's no direct object. There's nothing that's receiving action from this verb. But if you didn't recognize that as a prep phrase and kind of eliminate it from the running right away, then you would just go, okay, here's my subject, here's my verb, river rushed what? I don't have an answer for that question. I'm looking, remember the direct object, I'm looking for a noun or a pronoun, kind of one word answer to that question. And we don't have that here. We just have a prepositional phrase that tells us where. And so that means that you're looking at an intransitive verb. If we have an action verb and it is not sending its action to some other word in the sentence, some noun or pronoun, then you know that we're dealing with an intransitive verb. So let's do some examples of these. If you're following along in notes, then you can do this in those notes, or if you're just kind of watching the video as you go, now is a good time to pause and do the same thing. We're looking for subjects, for verbs, and then we're plugging into a formula to see if we have transitive or intransitive verbs. So pause the video, see if you can come up with some of those answers, and then continue. In this first sentence, dude, give that pen to me. This is kind of a tricky word. It really doesn't need to be there. If you're looking at this sentence, give that pen to me, that's imperative. And so we have to add in our subject. The subject is not dude. The subject is you. It's the understood you. So we need to make sure that we hit that. And then we say, what's the verb here? It's give. So you give, and we plug into our formula. Remember the formula for a direct object. I'll try to keep reminding you of this because I want you to get into the habit of using it. Subject plus verb plus this question. We're looking at the verb and we're asking it this question, what? We're saying subject plus verb plus what is going to yield a direct object if there is one. And if we don't get a good answer to that question, then we're going to say there's not a direct object. So you give what? Pen answers that question, which means it's the direct object. And then that means that give is a transitive verb, and we would label it TRV. That's how you'll do this on tests and quizzes. You give pen. You give what? Pen. We could also, by the way, kind of eliminate prepositional phrases. Remember that. The next one says, the antelope ran so fast that the lion gave up. We're going to deal not with this dependent clause. We're going to deal with the independent clause. The antelope ran so fast. Our subject is antelope. Our verb is ran. And then we need to plug into our formula. Antelope ran what? Now again, be very careful in the way that you answer that question. Somebody's going to be tempted to say it ran what? It ran fast. But this word fast has two problems. It's not a noun. We want a noun or a pronoun for a direct object, and this is not a noun or a pronoun. And it's answering how, not what. That word fast is telling us it ran how. So that makes it an adverb. And we know adjectives and adverbs are not going to be direct objects. So antelope ran what? We don't get one. Fast is an adverb modifying ran. So is an adverb modifying fast. So in this sentence, ran is intransitive, and then we would label it INV for intransitive verb. There's no direct object. Number 3, authors usually write about what they know about. Again, we're not going to deal with this dependent clause over here. We're going to deal with the independent clause. So authors, and then what are they doing? They write. And then you say authors write what? Well, about is either an adverb if it's by itself, or a preposition if it's part of a prepositional phrase, and that can't be our direct object. So authors write, you have a subject and an intransitive verb. Subject intransitive. Since we don't have a direct object, it's intransitive. And the last one, number 4, can you please pass the salt? Our subject is you. Our verb is split. It's can, please. Remember, interrogative sentence tells us that we're going to have an inverted structure. So you can, oh, sorry, not please. That's not what I meant to put there. You guys probably saw that error and noticed. Instead of please, what should it be? You can pass. So if you say you can pass as your subject and verb, we plug it into our formula. You can pass what? Salt answers that question, and that makes it the direct object, and that makes pass or can pass a transitive verb. So that's what this comes down to, guys. When you're looking at action verbs, every single action verb is either going to be transitive or intransitive. And the way that we figure that out is we just plug into a formula. I'm going to keep sending us back to this information up here. We always want to remember this is how we find direct objects. Subject plus verb plus what? And that gives us a direct object if there is one. If you don't get a noun or pronoun answer to that question, then you're not looking at a transitive verb, and we would have to call it intransitive. Okay? So that's it for this one, transitive and intransitive verbs. I hope that's helpful for you. And as always, feel free to email me with any questions that you might have. See you guys soon.